So we now have half an hour allocated for discussion. Is anybody wanting to start off? Jeffrey.
Thank you very much for wonderful presentations. I want to make a historical point that I think is important for our subject. Sometimes we deal with the market economy from the theoretical point of view, which, and in the current Anglo-American teaching, glorifies the market, and then we attack it as not being an accurate description. But I think it's important to start with the historical development of the market and to understand that the roots of the market to our day are roots with extreme violence attached to it. So the market economy has never looked anything like the pristine descriptions that are offered perhaps in a late 20th century textbook justification. The real beginnings of the modern market economy are in the years after the discoveries of the sea routes to the Americas and to Asia. And this is really when modern capitalism develops. And modern capitalism is characterized by a new corporate organization that undertakes economic activity with considerable autonomy and with a privileging of owners of that enterprise. So that's the modern capitalist joint stock company or chartered stock company. And of course, the Dutch East India Company or the English East India Company or the South Seas Company are exemplary of that. And I think that the point from the very beginning is that these companies, these enterprises, are enterprises of extraordinary energy and extraordinary violence. And they are intrinsically linked with power as well as with the economy. There is no separation of economy and state from the beginning. The market economy is an economy of power. It's an economy of exploitation. It's an economy of slavery. It's an economy of abuse from the very start. I think this is not accidental. What we learn from a market economy on the positive side and the negative side together is the essential Faustian bargain of a market economy, which is that it is designed to unleash greed and all the energy that greed can mobilize. And I think history teaches that the energy mobilized by greed is almost unlimited. People will kill, they will slaughter, they will work for the entire lives in pursuit of wealth. They will organize remarkable, innovative activities. Within a century of the unification of the world by sea trade, there was global production chains in cotton, in coffee, in sugar, in gold, in tobacco. Unbelievable creations when you think about it, how much ingenuity, effort, creativity, technological breakthrough was unleashed by giving greed its full freedom. That is the market economy. But what was also unleashed was African slavery, suppression of indigenous populations, murder, slaughter, genocide, ethnic cleansing. And this is part of the market economy from the very start. So I don't think that there is really ever, first of all, a separation of state and market from any time in history. The market are leading actors of wealth who call upon the state for protection, for power, for privilege, for patents, for monopoly rights, and that's a history of capitalism. I think there's no doubt that capitalism has generated a level of economic activity and a technological dynamism that is completely unmatched by any other system of organization in history, far and away outstripping. This is a reflection of the perversity of human nature, how much energy can be mobilized by greed. What happened, of course, in the context of this is that greed became celebrated through the very creative philosophy of the invisible hand, because it was Mandeville who already told us in the early 17th century that greed would, or early 18th century, excuse me, that greed would create the conditions for overall social improvement, because it would make, in the fable of the bees, it would make the strong beehive of society as each pursues their greedy self-interest. And that became part of the doctrine of the invisible hand, and that became part of the theory of the market economy that we teach our students on page 1 of the introductory textbook. But at the core of it is the Faustian bargain. Unleash greed and get tremendous effort, but unleash greed and get tremendous violence. Unleash greed and get tremendous exercise of power against the poor. So I just bring this up because I think we need an unvarnished view of what a market society is, how it originated, how it has evolved. It was a decisive change of ethics from the start. It said we take the economy outside of the ethical boundaries. It produced something unparalleled in human history. It created something also of horrendous moral bankruptcy as well. And that's what we continue to grapple with. How to get, if possible, the benefits of this system of the energy, the creativity, the dynamism, without the force, the destruction, the abuse that is inevitably unleashed by the primacy of greed in the human affairs. And the question is whether such a balance can be achieved, and what kinds of social systems can achieve it. We've tried many different variants. I'll just close by saying that the social democratic variant, as implemented in a few places in the world, notably in Scandinavia in the last 50 years, is the closest we have, in my view, to mobilizing greed on the one hand and constraining it within a social context at the same time. The United States lives on the Anglo-American glorification of greed. It is unconstrained both in its vulgarity, in its antagonism to the poor, and in its militarism. And that's not an accident. They all go together.
Thank you very much, Geoffrey, for your usual pointed and excellent contribution. If I could just add one thing to it, because you have concentrated so intensively upon marketized greed, quite rightly so. But let's not forget that that does not concern economic life, stricto sensu, but it affects many other social institutions, in particular education, which becomes commodified, something else that can be bought for on the market for money. And there are many other things that a sociologist could add to this, none of which detract from your basic point about the infiltration, the societal and now global infiltration of commodification and commodified competition through capitalist market forces. So thank you very much for that. Now, John?
Someone of the replay. Stefano.
No, there is Miranda.
Anna. Oh, okay. So, do you want to respond
I will answer at the end.
At the end. That's fine, and I think that's very helpful. So, I'm watching myself.
Well, in some sense, my question is anticipated by Jeffrey Sachs. But in substance is this. Aristotle also, when he speaks about the form of governance, say that one is the democracy, but also say that they are the corruption of democracy, because could be that some group, oligarchy, control the things in benefit of itself. So when we have this, and especially in a form of plutocracy, that is a group to try to control the politic for money, for profit, what can we do? Especially if this is a very important country that put in reality the democracy in the modern times, that was the first democracy, and in some sense put the example for the other democracies, especially after the war. What can we do? Because this is the problem.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I think our speakers made some very important points, and for me it's important, I think, to also emphasize that if we enlarge the objects of research, from looking at business or institutions only, and also bring in civil society, this requires also, I think, some methodological changes. We are not only changing the object of research, but we have to also develop new methodological instruments. So, for example, psychological research distinguishes between cognitive and non-cognitive approaches. And I think we cannot really understand civil society, NGOs, without also employing cognitivist approaches, without also focusing on their intentions, on what they want to change, their mindsets, which they actually have. And maybe to just refer to Jeffrey's point, employing that in the analysis of business also makes you a little bit aware of the plurality of business practice across different representatives. I mean, if you look into the mindset of an investment banker, then I go with you concerning the description. If you look into the mindset of a small and medium entrepreneur in Italy, in northern Italy, or in south of Germany or whatever, you have a very different mindset, you have a very different ethos. And if you look into the mindset of a social entrepreneur in Brazil or so, there is still another mindset, another form and practice of business. So I think we should become more aware of the plurality of approaches here. And here I come to another point. I think we, enlarging towards civil society, we also need more inductive research. Yeah, no, more inductive, looking really on case studies, looking at projects, and many papers here in the conference do that. Yeah, start with examples and what we see in the social universe, and carefully case studies. And here we need not only quantitative research, yeah, which is prevailing in economics, but also in sociology and parts of, but we need more qualitative research. We need also interviews. We need to understand the mindset of people in order, even especially if they interact in the context of certain institutions. Yeah? So interdependencies between institutions and mindsets. I think if we want to better understand this new area which Caritas in Veritate opens up for us, we have to enlarge our methodological instruments. Thank you.
An interesting contribution, but I would like to say quite a lot about this as a social theorist. I think we have to be very careful. There is no one-to-one relationship between psychology and sociology and economics. And personally, I am rather suspicious, at least in the disciplines I know well, of the retreat into doing field studies, ethnographies, etc. In a way, they can become distractions. You can forget about the general principles that have been articulated here this morning by both Jeffrey and particularly Stefano's paper, and yet they present themselves in a very cunning fashion as being unchallengeable because only the researcher knows about one particular part of Nebraska, East Nebraska. Who can challenge this person? Only he, she has studied it. So we must be cautious. It can lead us onto sidetracks. So could I just pass on to the next speaker?
Just a short comment on that.
Sure.
I don't want to avoid. I want to avoid any misunderstanding. Yeah. So I don't think that you just telling stories in a way. Yeah. So just have narrative evidence here. But I think what is important is to understand the interaction between a certain social order which emerged in that context and this part of the world or this part of cultural background and the corresponding mindsets. So it's not only, it's more than just anecdotal evidence.
But I think we are interested here in causality, not in correlation. And so the correspondence between an ethnography, an ethnographically established mindset of some people, which is always variable because humans are unique, and some manifestations, such as the market, is tenuous and always supplemented, I believe, empirically, at the empirical level, by other factors. But I must not hog the microphone because we have Miranda waiting to speak. I invite.
Muchas gracias. Yo quisiera tomar ocasión de la excelente intervención del profesor Sach a propósito de la supuesta independencia, digamos, o no articulación del mercado con el Estado, y el argumento que él da me parece muy potente para criticar una presunta relación no atravesada por posiciones éticas y concepciones humanas, digamos. Claramente él muestra la evidencia de lo mismo. Pero quiero no redundar en la misma idea, sino tomar otro elemento que está muy presente en su argumentación, profesor Samani, como criticando, pero agregar un argumento desde la teoría sociológica contemporánea, la idea de los mercados autorregulados, digamos, ¿no es cierto? así como está la idea de esta autonomía de esferas de valor casi absoluta entre economía y Estado, y el profesor Sachs pone en discusión eso con mucha solvencia. También ahí hay una invisibilización de ciertas comprensiones del humano y operaciones del humano que muestran que ese es un discurso que queda muy bien cuando lo que se busca con ello es despolitizar la sociedad. Y al despolitizar la sociedad, se la saca también de la esfera económica, digamos, ¿no? Y me refiero particularmente al debate Habermas-Luhmann, y particularmente el Luhmann, que radicaliza la idea desde la sociología de sistemas autorreferenciales con el concepto de autopoiesis de un biólogo chileno Maturana, que no se sintió interpretado por el uso que hace Luhmann, desde luego, ¿no? Luhmann se hace cargo de eso. Y Luhmann tiene la pretensión de que hay que superar la teoría sociológica clásica y jubilar con honores a los clásicos, porque permanecen atados a una tradición humanista, digamos, al viejo humanismo europeo, que presume que la sociedad es obra humana. Y él quiere aportar con rendimientos de la cibernética, de la matemática, de la biología y algunos elementos de la fenomenología de Husserl, que ese es un presupuesto falso y que la sociedad existe con independencia de la agencia humana. Y mostrar que los sistemas, el gran sistema social y los sistemas en ella, subsistemas, son autopoyéticos y por lo tanto los seres humanos solo están en el entorno del sistema, pudiendo irritarlo, pero nunca dirigirlo, por ejemplo, como plantea Francisco, crear un sistema regulativo efectivo, digamos, ¿no? Para detener esta crisis, digamos, que él postula de una raíz bastante conocida. El problema es de esa teoría, resultaba muy potente para explicar varios fenómenos. El problema es que investigaciones posteriores, en las que me tocó participar activamente, mostraron que la crítica al prejuicio humanista en la sociología clásica de Luhmann se fundaba en una concepción también humanista. El problema fue descubrir cuál era el humanismo sobre el cual Luhmann formulaba la teoría de los sistemas autopoyéticos, ¿sí? Y eso se descubrió, y el autor nunca señaló en ninguna parte de sus obras, en ninguna parte, que era deudor de una tradición filosófica que es particularmente la antropología filosófica alemana, ¿sí? Especialmente Plessner, por nombrar solamente uno, desarrollaron el aparato teórico que después Luhmann lleva al campo de los estudios de la sociedad, incluso de la mano de su maestro Chelsky, también discípulo o miembro de esta tradición de antropología filosófica alemana, de tal suerte que la teoría de los sistemas autopoyéticos, de los sistemas sociales de Luhmann, descansa completamente en una antropología filosófica. Alemana sería un accidente, digamos. Quiero decir, en una antropología. Es decir, que la crítica, por lo tanto, a la pretensión humanista de intentar dar forma a los sistemas, que chocaría contra la autopoiesis de ellos y por lo tanto vería ilusa cualquier pretensión como la del pensamiento social de la Iglesia, de generar algún tipo de intervención, ¿sí? Se cae en su crítica porque esa crítica se basa en una otra antropología. O sea, el debate en ese punto es nuevamente qué comprensión del humano es la que se coloca en las teorías que hablan de la autorregulación, mercados autorregulados, y ya tenemos dos evidencias de que las instrucciones fundamentales de esas concepciones fluye por las venas abiertas de esas obras, ¿sí? Fluyen caudales muy potentes de concepciones del humano, y por supuesto cuando de eso se trata, es perfectamente comprensible que Laudato Si vaya a sostener entonces la necesidad de una imperiosa, un trabajo a nivel ético y espiritual, que parta de una concepción del humano relacional, como postula el profesor Donati, pero que no sucumba ante estos, diríamos, perdón la expresión coloquial, cantos de sirena, formulados en complejos y abstractos teorías y sistemas teóricos, pero que sin embargo invisibilizan sus propias opciones antropológicas.
And be quick, we have, yes, I know. So Can I give you the floor? But please leave 5 minutes for
Go ahead.
Professor Zamani to...
So I just want to say also in reaction to Jeff Sachs that we have bad energies, you know, the grids, all these things, but also we can see at economics from another side. I think that there are, today, most economists are focusing on how good energy can create growth and development, and the focus is on social capital. Social capital is basically, from a microeconomic level, life is made of social dilemma, where there is asymmetric information, there is incomplete contracts, and if people cooperate, they can create added value. Hume says it very well now in 1740. So basically now everyone is looking, how can we create social capital, how can we increase social capital, and the difference in the wealth of regions depends on social capital. Evidence is widespread, and this is causal evidence. In Italy, we have regions with very high social capital, like Emilia Trentino, where agricultural farmers created groups, coalitions, they climbed up the value chain, and they're rich, and other places where people don't cooperate, there is mistrust. So I think we should really focus on that, and I think that case studies are very important from this point of view. What Andre said, basically we created a revolution in Italian social weeks because we decided we don't want to make a conference on an old hero of the past, but we want to find who are the good practices today. And we identified 400 good practices, and from these 400 good practices, we create a suggestion for the government, and this is going to be next week. And this is going. I think this is really important because the new good things, they are really small, they are really sprouts, and you have to look at them, and you can learn a lot from these things to create good. And I think that's the logic of the civil economics we are running with Stefano and many others.
Thank you.
Stefano,
Well, very briefly, Jeff mentioned Mandeville. As you know, the title of Mandeville's book, The Fable of the Beast, is the most unfortunate for his thesis, because if there is one category of animal which are not greed, are the bees, because the bees produce honey, but they do not eat honey. We eat it. So Mandeville was possibly misdirected, we know why, but he uses, for defend the thesis of natural greediness of people, a wrong metaphor. The second remark is that perhaps you should have mentioned that the idea of Mandeville derives from Guicciardini. Guicciardini was a man from Tuscany, Renaissance period. He was the first at the end of the 16th century to introduce that notion that Mandeville elaborated into the Fable of the Beast. But the important point connected to André Abish is I interpret his remark on the necessity of changes in methodologies in the following way. He says, so far, economists dealt with essentially with market relations. The political theories dealt with state relations. Then social scientists with civil society. He perhaps suggests that we cannot continue along this path because if we keep on separating the three areas and associating each, let's say, methodology to each one of them, there will be no way to foster dialogue, etc. Because one speaks and the other ones do not understand. So perhaps that is my interpretation to what he said. That is a real challenge. Miranda, you said, mentioned that the notion of mercato autoregolato, the market which is unable to self-regulate. As you know, today, you will find no economist in the world who will subscribe to that. So in a sense, it's useless to continue to talk about, because after in particular the crisis 10 years ago, no economist believes any law. On the other hand, this notion of market outer comes from the French Enlightenment, because it was elaborated during the French Enlightenment, when the belief was of a natural order. They said, you know, the analogy with Newton.
in the physics. They said there is a natural order which regulates the working of the markets. And then the economist took, in a very, in my opinion, stupid way, exactly that notion, which was not born inside economics, but outside. And that is, and finally, what Becchetti and Leonardo just said, yes, today we know strategies how to build up a good social capital, because we should never forget that social capital is of two types, good and bad. Bonding social capital is dangerous, and in many parts of the world, perhaps our Latin American friends here can help us to understand, there is too much negative bonding social capital. We need bridging social capital. That is the good social capital. So it's not enough to talk about social capital. We have always to distinguish, because as I keep on saying, social capital is like cholesterol. In our body, there is good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. And so if we increase bonding social capital, disasters are guaranteed. We need to find strategy to increase bridging social capital, which is the one which generates trust relations and not only economic development, but in particular civil progress. Thank you.